Terastalization is the new mechanic introduced in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And though you might think it's just a weird fashion statement, it actually does a lot more than just give your Pokemon a funny hat. Today we're going over every single thing you need to know about this new mechanic, from what it is to how to use it. The Terastal phenomenon is this generation's gimmick. Just like Mega Evolution, Dynamax, and Z moves, Terastalization is a once per battle mechanic that is looking to shake things up more than ever before. By terastalizing, you give up your Pokemon's type and turn into any type of your choosing. Kind of. You can't just click Terastalize and pick one of the 18 types. Your Pokemon only has one type that it can change into, and what type that is depends on the Tera type it had when you got it. And what type will that be? Well, it depends. If you just head on out into the wild and catch a random Pokemon, that Pokemon's Tera type will be one of the types that it already has. So if your Pokemon only has one type, that's what its Tera type is. And if it has two types, well, you've got a 50-50 shot. Of course, some wild Pokemon have rare Tera types. There's two subcategories. One is special Pokemon with an orange glow that are just walking around in the wild. If you run into one of these Pokemon, you get a mini boss battle where before you can try to catch the Pokemon, you need to first break its armor by knocking it out. The game will prevent the Pokemon from fainting unless you use passive damage like Sandstorm or Burn, and then it will KO it anyway, which is how I lost a really rare Tera Pokemon. Whoops. Anyway, once you break the armor, you can catch it as normal. For these Pokemon, you won't be able to tell what Tera type it has until you run into them and start the battle. This is one of the key differences between wild Tera Pokemon and Tera Raid Den Pokemon. Replacing Dynamax Dens from Sword and Shield, these wild dens are scattered across the map and are easy to spot because they shoot bright white pillars of light into the sky. Pressing A in front of these gives you a preview of the Pokemon you'll be fighting. And both the color of the den and the menu tell you what Tera type the Pokemon will have. Like Dynamax Dens, these are 4v1 battles that you can do with friends, strangers online, or CPUs. As you can imagine, this isn't the easiest way of getting a Pokemon with the Tera type that you want. Luckily for you, the game gives you the ability to change your Pokemon's Tera type. You do this by going to Medali City and paying an in-game currency called Tera Shards. There's one Tera Shard of every type, and you need 50 of them to change your Pokemon's Tera type. You collect these shards by doing Tera Raid Dens, and you can also find them scattered around the map lying on the ground as well. The thing is, even after beating the game, you're probably not going to have 50 of a single type. Now, at this point in the video, I know what you're thinking. Wow, Wolf, you're so good at Pokemon. Also, your name is so cool. I wish my name were as cool as yours. Well, I have good news for you. Your name can't be as cool as mine, but it can be a bit cooler thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Established Titles. Established Titles plants a tree with every order and works with global charities One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to support global reforestation efforts. This is a fun novelty, and you can include your title of Lord or Lady on your credit card, plane ticket, or dating profile. Title packs give you at least 1 square foot of dedicated land on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland, and an official certificate with a crest. The first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot, within a few minutes of walking distance. Depending on how many of you want to become a lord or a lady, we can build our little WolfeyVGC kingdom. I think it's a really funny concept, and I love that it also goes towards a good cause. Plus, it makes an amazing last-minute gift. Established Titles is actually running a massive Black Friday sale right now. Plus, if you use the code Wolfey10, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/Wolfey10 to get your gifts now and help support the channel. Now that you know how to get a Pokemon with the Tera type that you want, let's talk about some more specific questions. You already know that by terastalizing, you give up your Pokemon's original types and become a monotype Pokemon of your Tera type. There are some key differences though between a water Tera type Pokemon and a water type Pokemon. Pokemon that have terastalized keep their original stab bonuses. Stab is short for same type attack bonus, and it's a mechanic that lets Pokemon do 50% more damage when they use a move that matches one of their types. Tera Pokemon both keep their original stab bonuses and get a new stab bonus of their Tera type. So, for example, a Jigglypuff that's terastalized into the water type would deal 50% more damage with fairy, normal, and water type attacks. If a Pokemon terastalizes into a type they already have, like if our Jigglypuff became Tera Fairy, it would gain a bonus multiplier on its Tera type. Stab normally boosts moves by 50%, but if you terastalize into a type you already have, that bonus goes up to 100% more damage. So if our Jigglypuff decided to use Terra Fairy, it would do 50% more damage with normal type attacks and 100% more damage with fairy type attacks. Now, you can't just spam Terastalization during your playthrough. You need to go to a Pokemon Center to recharge your Terra Orb between uses. This is similar to Dynamax, where you could only use the mechanic during certain parts of the story, but I think this is better because you can use Terastalization as much as you want. You just need to go to a Pokemon Center before using it again. Unlike Dynamax, switching out your Terastal Pokemon does not cause you to revert back to your original form. Once you Terastalize your Pokemon, you can't change back until the end of the battle or your Pokemon gets knocked out. This is obvious, but Terra Pokemon receive all of the benefits of the type they turn into. For example, a Terra Fire Gyarados can't be burnt because fire types can't be burnt. If your Gyarados gets burnt and then Terastalizes into a fire type, though, it'll stay burnt. And if your fire type Terastalizes into, I don't know, a ghost type, then it can also be burnt. This is important. You cannot see what Terra type the opponent's Pokemon has in advance. This isn't as big a deal for the story, but if you want to play online or with friends, it's going to be a pretty big deal. Oh yeah, another thing we should talk about is Terra Blast. This is a 100% accurate 80 base power move that is a normal type attack before you Terastalize and your Terra type after. You get it naturally during the course of the story, but it's only good on certain Pokemon, so don't feel obligated to use it. With this, you should have a good understanding of the mechanics of Terastalization, but that's not everything you need to know. We're about to get into the really nitty-gritty stuff, but before we do, want to take a second and just make sure that you're subscribed? Lots of my viewers think that they're subscribed, but it turns out they actually aren't. YouTube has even unsubscribed regular viewers from my channel before. I'm going to be putting out a ton of content teaching you everything you need to know to become a Pokemon master. Plus, I'm working on some massive projects like opening a Pokemon gym in real life, so you're not going to want to miss it. Anyway, back to Terastalization. One of the hardest things about Terastalization is knowing which Terra type you want your Pokemon to have. While there aren't any hard and fast rules, I've laid out a few things that I think you should think about when considering what type you want to change into. The first thing to think about is, what do you want to use your Terra type for? Do you want to improve your offenses or your defenses? Ideally, of course, it improves both, but realistically, that's not possible for every Pokemon. So how can you tell what the most optimal Terra type is for your Pokemon? There's a few things to consider. First, think about what role the Pokemon already fills on your team. Is it a fast and offensive Pokemon like Weavile? Is it a slow and bulky Pokemon like Blissey? Typically, but not always, you want a Terra type that improves what your Pokemon is already doing well. Let's start by looking at some examples of offensive Terra types. Jolteon is a fast and strong attacker that struggles with Grass, Ground, and Dragon types. It's also a Pokemon who doesn't learn that many good moves by level up. With Terra Ice and Terra Blast, Jolteon can flip these horrible matchups on their head. I'm going to throw a note in here. If you're going to use your Terra type offensively for coverage, you need to make sure that you're using a move of that type. The newly introduced Terra Blast will always work, but you might have stronger alternatives. Make sure you look at what moves your Pokemon learns naturally before committing to Terra Blast. Talonflame, for example, has a really limited move pool, so you'll probably be using Terra Blast most of the time if you want a move of your Terra type. Because of its tremendous speed stat and Gale Wings ability, Talonflame's job most of the time don't require its defenses. Oh my god, I haven't looked at these in a while, but they are way worse than I thought. Anyway. Its main job is hit first, ask questions later. Normally the question is something like, why did I lose? And the answer is that its attack stat is not that great for a Pokemon with such bad defenses. Almost every Talonflame you run into is going to run Brave Bird, Flare Blitz for damage, and Tailwind because it's just such a good move and so useful to support the team. But the last move really depends on your Terra type. You might expect that the best Terra type here might be an offensive one, since Talonflame's attack is at least a little better than its defenses, right? Let's think about it with Terra Grass and Terra Blast to hit the water and rock types that normally threaten Talonflame. Well, now we're left with no room for a defensive move like Protect, Will-O-Wisp, or Quick Guard, leaving our Talonflame a sitting duck. Hawk? I don't know, but it's definitely some kind of a sitting bird. Also, since Talonflame isn't going to be Terastalizing every single battle, in a lot of matches you're going to be using Talonflame with only 3 moves that it can actually use well. The problem is, it's not like a defensive Terra type actually does Talonflame that much good because its defenses are just so bad. So what should poor Talonflame do? Never Terastalize? Nope. Instead, we can use Terastalization's other application, turning into a type that you already have. By using a fire or flying Terra type, Talonflame can increase its damage without needing to give up a move slot or run a defensive Terra type. This application is especially fitting on Pokemon with really high base power moves, especially when those moves can hit multiple Pokemon. The clearest example in my mind is Terrafire Torkoal using Eruption and dooming us all in Pompeii 2 Electric Booga. Wait, no, it's a fire type. Destined to doom us all with Pompeii 2 Fire Boogaloo. Don't quit your day job, Wolf. Just pretend that this joke was actually funny and makes you want to subscribe because I'm so funny and you want to see more of me. Now let's move on to some examples of defensive Terra types. These are best on Pokemon who either don't need help with their move coverage or don't care about doing damage in the first place. They're also best on Pokemon with the natural defenses to actually take advantage of them. Unlike offensive Terra types, you don't actually need to run a... Unlike offensive Terra types, you won't need to run a move that matches your defensive Terra type, making this application a bit more flexible. Oh, you want an example? Well, I've got two. Umbreon is a super tanky Pokemon that disrupts the enemy team while assisting its own team with moves like Helping Hand. Its role is basically to just be a nuisance, and I mean that in the best way possible. Shout out to all the Umbreon lovers. Please don't unsubscribe. With Terra Steel, Umbreon can turn its Fairy and Bug weaknesses into resistances, while becoming the single best defensive type in the game, making it even more annoying. I mean, making it even harder to remove from the field. But not all Pokemon that want a defensive Terra type are inherently defensive Pokemon. Magnezone is a Pokemon with a great special attack stat, but is really held back by its quadruple weakness to ground. With Terra Flying, Magnezone becomes immune to ground and resists fighting, one of its other weaknesses. However, it doesn't really have much use for flying type attacks. Switching to flying type can immediately be used to turn the tables on what would otherwise be a losing matchup. Lastly, some Terra types aid in both offense and defense. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the best case scenario, but it is really hard to come by. Whether or not a Pokemon can make use of these types of Terra types mostly comes down to typing. A lot of types. But ability stats and move pool all play a role as well. Gyarados is the clearest example. With Terra Ground, you become immune to electric type attacks, which you're normally quadruple weak to, but you also get a power boost on Earthquake, which is just a good move to have on Gyarados anyway. The only weakness to Gyarados using Terra Ground is because it's far and away better than like every other option, it's really predictable, so your opponent's almost never going to be caught off guard by it. But it's a small price to pay for this much power. And just like Batman says, with great power comes great responsibility. Don't quit your day job. If you still feel lost about what Terra type your Pokemon should have, don't worry. I have a video coming out in 1 week where I found the single best Terra type for every single Pokemon in the game. It has just taken a while because there are a lot of Pokemon. So now you know how Terastalization works and the best Terra type for your Pokemon. Are you ready to challenge your friends and crush them while wearing a silly hat? No, we still need to talk about when to Terastalize and which Pokemon you should Terastalize. There aren't any hard and fast rules here, but the key thing that you should be thinking about is value. You can only Terastalize once per battle, so you need to make it count. In my opinion, the secret to understanding when to Terastalize is understanding how it's going to affect the damage of the current turn. This is true for both offensive and defensive Terastalization. Is your full health Gyarados being threatened by an electric attack? Turning it to Terra Ground takes it from taking 100% damage to 0% damage, which is a pretty massive swing. That would be a great use of Terastalizing. What if your Gyarados only has 5% health left? Probably not the best idea. This is also true for offensive Terastalization. Let's say your opponent has a Tyranitar that's looking troublesome, and you have a surprise Terra Fighting Terra Blast combo on a Pokemon that doesn't normally run fighting type attacks. Surprising your opponent and picking up a KO can totally swing a battle. If that Tyranitar was instead low HP and you had another move that could KO it, maybe not the best time to Terastalize. It's really all about impact. If you can do way more damage or take way less damage by Terastalizing, it might be a good time to pull the trigger. Unless there's a specific Pokemon you're waiting to Terastalize, I'd personally recommend launching it at one of the first opportunities you get. You don't want to end up wasting it or not having a good opportunity to use it. In terms of which Pokemon you want to Terastalize, you're always going to be looking for a Pokemon that has a high impact on the battle. This is normally for offensive Pokemon that do lots of damage. Terastalizing can either help them do more damage or help them stay alive for longer. The other option is at the end of the game, using it on a defensive Pokemon that your opponent has no way to break through. Stay away from using Terastalization on support Pokemon in most cases. The last thing we should talk about is how to beat your opponent's Terastalization. This is really difficult, but I do have some tips. First, think about what Pokemon on your opponent's team have the most impact when Terastalized. Just like we already talked about, this is normally going to be either strong offensive Pokemon or really bulky defensive Pokemon. Next, think about what Terra types it would make sense for these Pokemon to have. This doesn't have to be exhaustive, just think about what types they already are and what types cover their weaknesses the best. Lastly, try and bait out Terastalization when you can by threatening strong attacks and then pulling back on the gas a little. As we learn more about Terastalizing, I'm sure more strategies and counterplay will develop, but starting with these should get you off to a strong start. And that's everything you need to know about Terastalization. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.